Last week I had my lawyer send one document to my dad by certified mail. Been getting calls ever since. 52 missed calls in 4 days. Messages where he sounds like he's choking on his own words. I haven't answered a single one, and I'm not going to, but I figured I'd share this story because honestly I've been carrying it around for 7 years and maybe writing it out will help me sleep better while I wait for what comes next. I was 16 when my dad kicked me out. Not just asked me to leave, not a heated argument that got out of hand. He physically emptied my room while his girlfriend Vanessa recorded the whole thing on her phone. I came home from school on a Thursday in October and found my stuff in garbage bags on the front lawn. My clothes, my school supplies, the posters from my wall, everything just dumped out there like actual trash. Gordon was standing in the doorway with Vanessa right behind him holding up her phone. He told me to pack my things and get out. Said I was nothing but a burden they were done carrying. Those were his exact words because Vanessa made sure to zoom in on my face when he said it. She narrated the whole thing like she was some kind of social media star. Kept saying this was her recording so everyone would know what a pathetic leech I was. Said her kids deserved my room, not some mistake from his past. I need to back up and explain how I even got there. My mom died when I was 14. Cancer. Took about 8 months from diagnosis to the end. Gordon fell apart during that time. Started drinking more. Stayed out late. After the funeral, he basically checked out of being a parent. I spent most of my freshman year at my friends' houses because being home meant sitting in a silent house with a dad who looked through me like I was invisible. Then he met Vanessa at some bar. She had 2 sons from a previous marriage, Stuart and Abel, both younger than me. Gordon changed fast after that. Started talking about fresh starts and new chapters. Vanessa moved in about 6 months after my mom died. Her sons came with her. Suddenly our 3-bedroom house felt crowded. I had the bigger bedroom because I'd had it since I was a kid. Stuart and Abel were sharing the smaller one, and apparently Vanessa had a problem with that arrangement. She started making comments about how much space I took up, how her boys needed room to grow, how it wasn't fair that I had a bigger room when I was barely home anyway. Gordon just nodded along with whatever she said. I think he was so desperate not to be alone that he would have agreed to anything. The thing is, the house wasn't even fully his. My mom's parents had helped with the down payment. When she died, there were some legal things about the property that Gordon was supposed to handle. He kept putting it off, said he'd deal with it later. I didn't understand any of that at 16. I just knew my mom was gone and my dad had replaced her in our family with a new one before she'd even been dead a year. So that Thursday in October, I'm standing on my front lawn with my school backpack still on, looking at garbage bags full of my life, and Gordon's telling me I'm done being a burden. Vanessa's still filming, adding her own commentary. She zoomed in on my face and said she was recording this so everyone would know what kind of person I was. Called me a leech again. Said her kids deserved the house, deserved a real family, not some disturbed teenager who just moped around bringing everyone down. Stuart and Abel were watching from the porch. They'd been living there for about 4 months at that point, and they'd never liked me. I think Vanessa had told them I was the problem, that I was taking resources away from them. Abel asked Gordon if I was really his kid. Gordon said not anymore. Said I was just some disturbed teen who used to live there and they should keep the doors locked. Then he pulled out his wallet and slapped $30 on top of one of the garbage bags. Said that was my inheritance, and I should never ask for another cent. Just left it there and went back inside. Vanessa posted the video that same night, called it taking out the trash. Real family only from now on. That's what she captioned it. I grabbed what I could carry and walked to my friend Daphne's house. Her parents let me stay in their spare room for a few days while I figured things out. They wanted to call child services, but I begged them not to. I was 16 and a half, close enough to 17. I told them I'd be fine and I'd figure something out. I didn't want to end up in the system, and I definitely didn't want to give Gordon another chance to reject me in front of some social worker. I ended up staying with Daphne's family for about 3 weeks. Then I moved in with another friend's older brother who had an apartment and needed help with rent. I paid my share by working at a grocery store after school. Finished my junior year that way. Senior year, I moved into a house with 3 other guys. All of us working and barely scraping by, but we made it work. Gordon never checked on me, not once. Vanessa's video got a few hundred views before she made it private, but by then plenty of people had seen it. Teachers at school knew something was wrong, but I told them everything was fine. I couldn't focus on being humiliated when I was trying to survive. I graduated high school on time, worked full-time that summer, and saved every penny I could. Then I moved 2 states away. Just packed up my car and drove until I found a city where nobody knew me, and I could start over. Got a job doing warehouse work, then customer service, then worked my way into an office job. Took night classes at community college for 2 years, then transferred to a state university. The whole time I was angry. People talk about moving on, about healing and letting go. I never did any of that. Every single day I remembered standing on that lawn with my stuff in garbage bags. I remembered Vanessa zooming in on my face. I remembered Stuart and Abel laughing. I remembered Gordon saying I wasn't his kid anymore. I used that anger. Every time I wanted to quit school, I thought about Gordon telling Vanessa her kids deserved more than me. Every time I was exhausted from working and studying, I remembered him slapping $30 down like that was all I was worth. I made decisions specifically to put myself in a stronger position. Better job, better education, better everything. Not because I wanted to be successful for myself, because I wanted to be ready when the moment came. I finished my degree last year, got promoted at work, started making decent money for the first time in my life. And I finally hired a lawyer to look into something I'd been thinking about since I was 18. Remember how I mentioned my mom's parents helped with the house? And how there were legal things Gordon was supposed to handle after she died? Turns out he never did. The property had both my parents' names on it. And when my mom died, her share was supposed to go through probate. Gordon just kept living there and paying the mortgage like nothing changed. But legally, there were issues. Issues that a competent lawyer could help resolve. Issues that meant Gordon didn't have as much claim to that house as he thought he did. I spent 7 years getting my life together specifically for this. I didn't heal. I didn't move on. I stayed angry and I stayed focused. Last week, after months of legal paperwork and consultation, my lawyer sent Gordon a document by certified mail, the kind that requires a signature that creates a paper trail that can't be ignored. I don't know exactly when he signed for it or when he read it, but I know he got it because that same day my phone started going crazy. I'd kept the same number all these years even though Gordon never called it once in 7 years. Now, suddenly he can't stop. 52 missed calls in 4 days. Voice messages where his voice sounds wrong like he's been crying, saying my name over and over, begging me to call him back. Vanessa's called too. Her number shows up mixed in with his. Stuart sent me a Facebook message even though we're not friends. All of them suddenly desperate to talk to me after 7 years of absolute silence. I haven't responded to any of it. I've been waiting 7 years for this moment, and I'm going to let it play out exactly the way I planned. They wanted me gone? They got what they wanted. Now they can deal with the consequences of throwing out someone who actually had every right to be there. The lawyer says things are going to move forward in the next week or so. I've been getting everything in order on my end, reading over documents, making sure every detail is correct. This isn't about anger anymore. It's about fixing something that should have been handled 7 years ago when I was too young and too broke to do anything about it. I keep thinking about Gordon standing in that doorway telling me I was done being a burden, about Vanessa filming the whole thing for her social media followers, about those $30 sitting on top of a garbage bag like that was my entire worth to him. They're about to find out what that burden actually meant. And what happens when you throw away someone who had more claim to your life than you realized. I'll update when the next phase happens. Should be soon. Update 1. Okay, so it's been about a week since my last post, and things have escalated in ways I honestly didn't predict, even though I've been planning this for 7 years. I got some messages asking what exactly I sent Gordon and what my plan is, so I'll explain that first and then get into what's been happening, because it's been absolutely wild. The document my lawyer sent wasn't a lawsuit or anything dramatic like that. It was a formal notice regarding the property ownership of the house Gordon's been living in for the past 7 years. The house that used to be my mom's, too. The house where I grew up until I got thrown out at 16 with my stuff in garbage bags. Here's the thing nobody understood back then, including me. When my mom died, she owned half that house. Her name was on the deed alongside Gordon's. Her parents, my grandparents, had contributed about 40% of the down payment when my parents bought the place back in 2005. That wasn't a gift. That was an agreement with legal documentation that my mom would maintain equity in the property. When she died, Gordon was supposed to go through probate. He was supposed to settle the estate properly. He didn't do any of that. He just kept living there and paying the mortgage like nothing changed. But my mom had a will that my grandparents helped her set up when she got diagnosed, specifically because she wanted to make sure I was taken care of if anything happened to her. In that will, she left her share of the house to me, not to Gordon, to me, her minor son, who she knew would need something after she was gone. Gordon never filed the will for probate, never went through the legal process, just kept the document in a drawer somewhere and acted like he was the sole owner. For 7 years, he lived in a house that was legally partially mine. For 7 years, he paid a mortgage on a property he didn't fully own. The document my lawyer sent was a formal notice that I was claiming my inheritance, my mother's 50% equity in the house. We included copies of the will, the original deed, the documentation from my grandparents about the down payment, everything. We gave him 30 days to respond with either a buyout offer for my share or we'd be forcing a partition sale. That means if he can't buy me out, the court can force the house to be sold and split the proceeds according to ownership percentages. And with the current market value of that house compared to what's left on the mortgage, my share would be substantial. Substantial enough that Gordon would have to come up with a significant amount of cash to keep his house or lose it entirely. I knew he'd freak out when he understood what it meant. What I didn't expect was how Vanessa would react. The calls continued for about 3 days after my first post. Gordon, Vanessa, even Stuart, messaging me on Facebook. I ignored all of it. Then, on Monday morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was my Aunt Connie, Gordon's sister. We hadn't spoken since before my mom died. She started the conversation by saying she knew we hadn't talked in years, but Gordon had called her in the middle of the night having a complete breakdown. She said he was sobbing, saying he was going to lose everything, saying I was trying to destroy him. She wanted to know what was happening and if there was any way to work this out like family. I told her exactly what happened 7 years ago, how Gordon kicked me out at 16, how Vanessa filmed it, how they threw my stuff in garbage bags and told me I was nothing but a burden, how Gordon said I wasn't his kid anymore and gave me $30 like that was my inheritance, how I had to drop out of normal teenage life and work full-time just to survive, how neither of them checked on me once in 7 years. Connie went quiet for a long time. Then she said she didn't know about any of that. Gordon had told her I'd chosen to leave because I couldn't handle him being with someone new after my mom died. Said I was angry and rebellious and he'd tried to help me but I'd refused. Said I'd cut him off and refused all contact. I asked her why she never called me if she thought that was true. She didn't have an answer. Then she said that regardless of what happened between us, taking his house seemed extreme. She said Gordon barely kept up with the mortgage payments. She said Vanessa didn't work and her kids were still in school. She said forcing a sale would leave them homeless. I told her that was something Gordon should have thought about before he kicked his 16-year-old son out of that same house. I told her my mom wanted me to have that inheritance and Gordon stole it from me by never filing the will. I told her 7 years ago, Gordon decided I wasn't family anymore, so now I was just exercising my legal rights as a property owner. She tried to argue more, said I was being vindictive, said I was destroying people's lives over old grudges. I told her Gordon destroyed my life when I was still a kid, and now he gets to experience what that feels like. Then, I ended the call. 2 days after that, Vanessa posted on Facebook. Not the video from 7 years ago, but a new post. She wrote this long thing about how she and Gordon had taken in a troubled teen out of the goodness of their hearts, and now that teen had grown up and was trying to steal their home. She said they'd tried to help me, but I was mentally unstable and had always resented her relationship with Gordon. She said I was weaponizing legal technicalities to punish them for trying to have a normal family life. She didn't use my name, but anyone who knew them would know who she was talking about. The post got maybe 50 likes and a bunch of comments from her friends saying they couldn't believe someone would do that, how awful, how ungrateful. My friend Daphne, the one whose family let me stay with them when I first got kicked out, she saw the post. She commented on it. She said she remembered very clearly when I showed up at her house at 16 with garbage bags full of my clothes after being kicked out. She said she remembered me showing her the video Vanessa had posted. She said Vanessa was lying, and everyone who believed her should ask her why she never called child services if she was so concerned about a troubled teen. Vanessa deleted Daphne's comment within an hour. Then she blocked her. But other people had seen it. People started asking questions in the comments. Vanessa made the post private and then deleted it completely. That same day, I got an email from Stuart. Not a message, an actual email to my personal email address that he somehow found. The subject line was, "We need to talk about the house." In the email, he said he understood I was angry about what happened years ago, but I needed to understand their side. He said Gordon had been grieving when he got with Vanessa. He said Gordon made mistakes, but he'd been trying to build a new life. He said taking the house would hurt innocent people, meaning him and Abel. He said they'd lived there for 7 years, and it was their home too. He said they'd made memories there. He said I'd been gone for years and didn't even care about the place, so why did I want to take it now? I wrote back a very short response. I told him I'd lived in that house my entire childhood. I told him my mom died in that house. I told him every memory he had there was built on top of my family's history. I told him if he wanted to talk about innocent people getting hurt, he could start with the 16-year-old who got kicked out of his own home. I also told him that his mother filmed my humiliation and posted it online. I told him he and Abel laughed at me from the porch while I stood there with my entire life in garbage bags. I told him they'd been living in a house they had no legal right to, and now that was catching up with them. He didn't respond to that. Yesterday, my lawyer called me. He said Gordon's lawyer had reached out wanting to negotiate. They were proposing a payment plan where Gordon would buy out my share over time. My lawyer said the offer was low and the timeline was unrealistic. He said it looked like they were stalling. I told him to reject it. I told him to proceed with the partition action. I'm not interested in payment plans. I'm not interested in negotiations. I spent 7 years planning for this, and I'm not backing down now, because Gordon suddenly realized he screwed up. The lawyer said Gordon's lawyer also mentioned that Gordon wanted to talk to me directly, person to person, father to son, to work this out. My lawyer asked if I was interested in that. I said absolutely not. There's nothing Gordon can say to me that would change anything. He had 7 years to reach out. He had 7 years to apologize. He chose not to. Now he doesn't get to play the father card because he's facing consequences. This morning I got a text from an unknown number. It was Abel. He said he got my number from someone at my old high school who still had it. He said I needed to stop whatever I was doing. He said his mom was having panic attacks. He said Gordon was drinking again. He said I was tearing apart their family over something that happened years ago when I was just a kid. I responded to this one. I told Abel that his family tore apart my family. I told him Gordon was my father long before Vanessa showed up. I told him that house was my home long before they moved in. I told him if his mom was having panic attacks, maybe it was guilt finally catching up with her for what she did to a 16-year-old kid. Abel wrote back saying I was being cruel, said I didn't understand what it was like for them, said Gordon had given them stability after their dad left, said I was being selfish. I told him to watch the video his mom posted 7 years ago if he wanted to see what cruel actually looked like. Then I blocked his number. The partition action is moving forward. My lawyer says we'll probably have a court date within 6 weeks. In the meantime, Gordon has to respond formally to our claim. He either comes up with the money to buy me out at fair market value, or the house goes up for sale. And here's the thing that's really getting to them. Fair market value for my mom's 50% equity, minus the mortgage debt, comes out to roughly $130,000. Gordon doesn't have that. Even if he took out a loan, his credit isn't good enough. My lawyer ran preliminary checks on his financial situation as part of the legal discovery process. He's barely keeping up with current payments. There's no way he can refinance or get approved for that kind of money, which means the house will sell. And when it does, they'll have to move. Vanessa and her precious sons will have to find somewhere else to live. Gordon will have to face the reality that actions have consequences. 7 years ago, he told me I was done being a burden. Now he's about to find out what a real burden feels like. I'll update after the court date gets scheduled. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and I need to get this written down while it's still fresh because the last few days have been absolutely insane. For everyone who said Gordon would eventually show up in person, you were right. It happened last Friday, and it went about as badly as you'd expect. Before I get into that, let me catch you up on what happened in between. The court date for the partition action got scheduled for early December. My lawyer filed all the necessary paperwork, and Gordon's lawyer responded with another buyout offer. This one was slightly higher, but still way below market value and spread over 10 years. My lawyer said it was a joke, that Gordon was trying to lowball me, hoping I'd take something rather than nothing. I rejected it immediately, told my lawyer to push forward with the sale. Gordon's lawyer tried to argue that forcing a sale would cause undue hardship. My lawyer pointed out that kicking a 16-year-old out of his home also caused undue hardship, and Gordon didn't seem concerned about that. During this time, the messages kept coming. Vanessa was texting me from different numbers. She'd say things like, I needed to think about what I was doing to innocent children. She'd say Stuart and Abel had nothing to do with what happened 7 years ago, and I was punishing them unfairly. She'd say Gordon was sick with stress, and if anything happened to him, it would be my fault. I didn't block the numbers. I wanted to see what they'd say. I wanted documentation of their harassment. Then my grandparents got involved. My mom's parents, the ones who helped with the down payment on the house. They're both in their 70s now, and they live about 3 hours away from where Gordon is. Apparently, Gordon called them and told them I was trying to steal his house. He told them I was being vindictive and cruel. He told them my mom would be ashamed of what I was doing. My grandmother called me on a Wednesday morning. She was crying. She said she didn't understand why I was doing this. She said Gordon was family, and we needed to work things out. She said my mom wouldn't have wanted me to destroy her father like this. I asked her if Gordon ever told her what happened when I was 16. She said he told her we'd had a falling out and I'd chosen to leave. She said he'd tried to reach out, but I'd refused contact. She said these things happen with teenagers and parents sometimes. I told her the truth. All of it. How Gordon kicked me out. How Vanessa filmed it. How they threw my belongings in garbage bags on the lawn. How Gordon said I wasn't his son anymore and gave me $30. How I had to live with friends and work full-time to survive while finishing high school. How neither of them checked on me for 7 years. My grandmother went quiet for a long time. Then she asked why I never told them. I said I was 16 and scared and ashamed. I said I thought if I could just make it to 18 I'd be fine. I said I didn't want to be a burden on anyone else. She started crying harder. She said they would have taken me in. She said they didn't know. She said Gordon had told them I was angry about him moving on after my mom died and needed space. Then she said something that made me angrier than anything else so far. She said when my mom was dying, she made Gordon promise to take care of me. She made him swear he'd make sure I finished school and had a home. My grandmother was there when it happened. She heard my mom make Gordon promise. Gordon looked her in the eye while she was dying and promised to take care of me. Then 2 years later, he threw me out like garbage. My grandmother said she was going to talk to Gordon. She said she wanted to understand why he lied. I told her she could do whatever she wanted, but it wouldn't change my legal claim to the house. She said she understood and that she was sorry. 2 days after that conversation, Gordon showed up at my apartment. I live in a decent building with a security door, but someone must have let him in because Friday evening around 7, I heard knocking. I looked through the peephole and there he was. Gordon. Standing in my hallway. First time I'd seen him in person in 7 years. He looked terrible. He'd gained weight. His hair was thinner. He looked older than 53. He was wearing a jacket that didn't fit right and he kept shifting his weight from foot to foot. I thought about not opening the door. I thought about calling the police. But I'd been waiting for this moment for 7 years. I wanted to hear what he had to say. I wanted to look him in the eye. I opened the door, but I didn't invite him in. He started talking immediately. Said he'd driven 5 hours to see me. Said we needed to talk man to man. Said this had gone too far and we needed to fix it before it destroyed everything. I asked him how he found my address. He said Connie had helped him track me down through some old school records. I made a mental note to deal with that later. Gordon said he knew I was angry. He said he understood why. He said what happened 7 years ago was a mistake and he'd been in a bad place. He said he was grieving my mom and he wasn't thinking clearly. He said Vanessa had pushed him to make decisions he shouldn't have made. I asked him if Vanessa also pushed him to tell me I wasn't his son anymore. I asked if she pushed him to slap $30 down and call it my inheritance. I asked if she pushed him to let her film the whole thing and post it online. He said she'd been difficult during that time. He said she'd had her own issues and she'd been pushing to make the house feel like theirs. He said he should have stood up to her, but he was afraid of being alone again. I told him being afraid of being alone wasn't an excuse for throwing out your kid. I told him plenty of single parents don't abandon their children because they're scared. He said he didn't abandon me. He said I'd chosen to leave. He said I'd been angry and difficult, and he'd thought giving me space would help. He said he'd expected me to come back after a few days. This is where I lost it. I told him I didn't choose anything. I told him he physically removed my belongings from the house. I told him he told me to pack my stuff and get out. I told him he said I was a burden he was done carrying. I told him those were his exact words, and Vanessa had them on video. Gordon said I was remembering it wrong. He said emotions were high that day and I was twisting what actually happened. He said yes, we'd had a fight, but he never meant for me to leave permanently. I asked him why he never called, why he never checked on me, why he let 7 years pass without a single message. He said he thought I needed time. He said he thought I'd reach out when I was ready. He said he didn't want to push me if I wasn't ready to talk. I asked him about my mom's will. I asked him why he never filed it for probate. I asked him why he let me think I had no claim to anything. He said he'd been planning to handle it. He said it was complicated legal stuff and he kept putting it off. He said he'd always intended to split things fairly when the time came. I asked him when exactly that time would have come. When I turned 25? 30? Never? He didn't have an answer for that. Then he changed tactics. He said he knew I was hurt, but taking the house wouldn't fix anything. He said it would just make everyone suffer. He said Vanessa's kids had lived there for 7 years and it was their home. He said forcing them to move would be cruel. I asked him if he thought kicking me out at 16 was cruel. He said that was different. I asked him how. He couldn't explain. He said he couldn't afford to buy me out. He said the number my lawyer was asking for was impossible. He said he barely kept up with the mortgage as it was. He said if the house sold, he'd have nowhere to go. I told him that 7 years ago, I had nowhere to go either and he didn't care. He started getting emotional. His voice got louder. He said I was being vindictive. He said I was punishing him for mistakes he made years ago. He said I'd built a whole new life, and I didn't even need the money, I just wanted to hurt him. I told him he was wrong. I told him I needed that money 7 years ago when I was working 40 hours a week and trying to finish high school. I told him I needed it when I was living in a house with 3 other guys and eating rice and beans for dinner every night. I told him I needed it when I was taking night classes and barely sleeping because I was working full-time during the day. I told him I built my life without his help specifically so I'd be strong enough to take back what was mine. He said the house wasn't mine. He said he'd been paying the mortgage for 20 years. He said he'd put work into it. He said just because my mom's name was on the deed didn't mean I deserved half. I reminded him that his name wasn't the only one on the deed either. I reminded him that my mom's parents put 40% down. I reminded him that my mom's will specifically left her share to me. I reminded him that he'd stolen my inheritance by refusing to file probate. He said he didn't steal anything. He said he'd kept a roof over my head for 16 years. He said he'd fed me and clothed me and put me through school. He said that was worth something. I told him that's called being a parent. That's the bare minimum. I told him he didn't get credit for doing what he was legally required to do. This went on for over an hour. Back and forth in my hallway, Gordon trying every argument he could think of. Guilt, logic, emotion, anger. Nothing worked. I stood my ground on everything. Finally, he said that if I went through with this, we'd never have a relationship again. He said I'd be choosing money over family. He said I'd regret it someday when he was gone, and I'd thrown away my only father over a house. I told him he'd already made that choice 7 years ago when he said I wasn't his son anymore. I told him he'd thrown away his only child over a woman he'd known for less than a year. I told him I'd spent 7 years learning to live without a father, and I was doing just fine. He left after that. Didn't say anything else. Just turned around and walked away. The next day, my lawyer called. Gordon's lawyer had contacted him with a new proposal. Gordon wanted to do a payment plan with a lump sum up front. $20,000 now and the rest over 5 years. My lawyer said it was still below market value, and the terms were terrible, but it showed Gordon was getting desperate. I told him to reject it and proceed with the partition sale. Then yesterday, Vanessa called me from Gordon's phone. I picked up thinking it was him. She started talking before I could hang up. She said I was destroying their family. She said Stuart was having trouble at school because of the stress. She said Abel was acting out. She said Gordon was drinking every night and she was afraid for his health. She said I could stop this anytime I wanted. She said all I had to do was accept a reasonable payment plan. She said we could work something out that didn't involve courts and lawyers. She said family should work things out privately. I asked her when exactly I became family. I asked her if I was family when she was filming me getting kicked out. I asked her if I was family when she posted that video online. I asked her if I was family when she told her followers I was a pathetic leech. She said that was years ago. She said she'd been stressed and made mistakes. She said Gordon had painted me as a problem child and she'd believed him. She said if she'd known the whole truth, she would have handled things differently. I asked her why she never bothered to find out the truth. I asked her why she never thought it was strange that a 16-year-old kid just disappeared and nobody checked on him. I asked her why she accepted Gordon's version without question. She said she'd been focused on her own kids. She said she'd been trying to build a stable home for them after their dad left. She said she'd trusted Gordon to handle his relationship with me. I told her she'd actively participated in kicking me out. I told her she'd filmed it and mocked me. I told her she'd posted it online for entertainment. I told her she didn't get to pretend she was just a bystander. She started crying. She said she was sorry. She said she'd made terrible choices. She said she'd do anything to fix this. She said we could have a relationship going forward if I just stopped the legal action. I told her I didn't want a relationship with her. I told her I wanted what was legally mine. I told her she and Gordon had 7 years to make this right and they chose not to. I told her now they got to deal with the consequences. She said I was being heartless. She said I'd changed. She said the kid she'd known wouldn't have been this cold. I told her the kid she knew died on that lawn 7 years ago when his father threw him away. I told her I was someone different now, someone who didn't let people walk all over him. Then I hung up. The court date is in 3 weeks. My lawyer says Gordon's lawyer is going to try to delay, but we have a strong case. The house will sell. Gordon will have to move. Vanessa and her kids will have to find somewhere else to live. And honestly, after this week, I don't feel bad about any of it anymore. Final update. It's been a month since my last post, and this whole thing has finally reached its conclusion. The house sold 3 days ago. Gordon and Vanessa have 30 days to vacate. I'm writing this because people have been asking for the final update, and because, honestly, I want to document the end of something I've been working toward for 7 years. The court hearing happened on December 8th. My lawyer told me I didn't have to attend, but I wanted to be there. I wanted to see Gordon's face when the judge ruled. I wore a suit. I took the day off work. I drove the 5 hours back to the town I grew up in. Gordon was there with his lawyer. Vanessa sat in the gallery behind him. Stuart was there too, which surprised me. Abel wasn't. Gordon looked worse than when he'd shown up at my apartment. His suit didn't fit right. He kept wiping his hands on his pants. The hearing took about 90 minutes. My lawyer presented the will, the original deed, the documentation from my grandparents about the down payment, the probate records showing Gordon never filed anything. Gordon's lawyer argued that I'd abandoned any claim to the property by leaving at 16 and staying away for 7 years. My lawyer pointed out that you can't abandon an inheritance you didn't know you had. especially when the person responsible for filing probate deliberately avoided doing so. Gordon's lawyer tried to argue undue hardship, said forcing the sale would leave Gordon and his family homeless, said I had a good job and didn't need the money while Gordon was barely surviving financially. My lawyer said that Gordon's financial situation was his own responsibility, and that denying me my legal inheritance because Gordon had mismanaged his finances for 7 years wasn't legally sound. The judge asked Gordon directly why he never filed probate for his wife's will. Gordon said he'd been grieving and it had slipped through the cracks. The judge asked why it had slipped for 7 years. Gordon didn't have a good answer. The judge asked if Gordon had known the will existed. Gordon said yes. The judge asked if Gordon had known the will left property to me. Gordon said yes. The judge asked why Gordon had never informed me of this. Gordon said he'd planned to eventually. The judge looked at him for a long time without saying anything. Then she asked Gordon if he understood that by not filing probate, he'd effectively denied his son access to his legal inheritance. Gordon said it hadn't been intentional. The judge said the effect was the same regardless of intent. Then she ruled in my favor, said the will was clear, the inheritance was legitimate, and Gordon's failure to file probate didn't negate my claim. She ordered the property be listed for sale within 30 days, said Gordon had the option to buy me out at the appraised value of my share within that time frame, or the house would go to auction. Said if Gordon couldn't secure financing, the partition sale would proceed. Gordon tried to speak. His lawyer stopped him. Vanessa started crying in the gallery. Stuart put his arm around her. Outside the courthouse, Gordon tried to approach me. His lawyer was talking to him, probably telling him not to, but Gordon came over anyway. He asked if we could talk for just a minute. I told him we'd already talked. He said the judge didn't understand the whole situation. I asked him what part she didn't understand. He said she didn't know how hard things had been for him after my mom died. He said she didn't know how much pressure Vanessa had put on him. He said she didn't know I'd been difficult as a teenager. I told him the judge knew everything that mattered. She knew he'd kicked me out at 16. She knew he'd never filed probate. She knew he'd stolen my inheritance. Everything else was just excuses. Vanessa came over then. She looked directly at me and said I must be really proud of myself. Said I was destroying a family over money. Said her sons were going to have to leave the only stable home they'd ever known because I couldn't let go of the past. I asked her if she still had the video, the one she posted 7 years ago. She said she didn't know what I was talking about. I said the video of her filming me getting kicked out. The one where she zoomed in on my face and called me a pathetic leech. The one where she said her kids deserved the house and I was just a mistake from Gordon's past. She said that was taken out of context. I asked her what context makes filming a teenager getting thrown out of his home acceptable. She didn't answer that. Stuart spoke up then. Said I didn't understand what this was doing to their family. Said his mom had been having panic attacks. Said Gordon was falling apart. Said Abel had gotten into a fight at school because other kids were talking about them losing their house. Said I was ruining lives over something that happened when everyone was in a bad place. I told Stuart that 7 years ago, I was the one whose life got ruined. I told him I was 16 working full-time and trying to finish school because his mom and Gordon decided I was in the way. I told him his mom filmed it for entertainment. I told him they'd laughed while I stood there with my entire life in garbage bags. He said that was years ago and people change. I told him the money I was owed didn't change. The will didn't change. The law didn't change. Gordon made choices and now he got to live with them. Gordon said I was still his son. Said that had to count for something. Said we could work this out if I'd just give him more time. Said he could figure out the financing if I'd wait. I told him 7 years ago he said I wasn't his son anymore. I told him he made that choice. I told him I'd given him 7 years and he'd never once reached out. I told him he didn't get to play the father card now that there were consequences. Then I left, drove back to my apartment. Let them figure out what came next. The house appraised at $340,000. The remaining mortgage was about $160,000. My mom's 50% equity came out to $90,000 after the mortgage was subtracted from the total value. Gordon had 30 days to come up with $90,000 or the house would be listed. He couldn't do it. He tried everything. Applied for loans, got rejected. Applied for a home equity line of credit, got rejected. His credit was terrible, and his debt-to-income ratio was too high. He asked family members for money. Most of them refused after my grandmother told them what really happened 7 years ago. Connie, Gordon's sister, called me during this time. She said she'd talked to my grandmother. She said she understood now why I was doing this. She said she was sorry for trying to defend Gordon before. She said what he did to me was unforgivable. She offered to testify on my behalf if there were any more court proceedings. I thanked her but said it wouldn't be necessary. The house went on the market 3 weeks ago. It's a decent property in a good school district. My lawyer said it would probably sell fast. He was right. We had 5 offers within a week. We accepted one last Monday. All cash offer, no contingencies. Closing date set for January 15th. Gordon called me when he found out. I actually answered this time. He was barely coherent. He said I was really going to do this. He said I was really going to take his home. He said he'd lived there for 23 years. He said every memory of my mom was in that house. He said I was erasing her by selling it. I told him my mom's memory wasn't in the house. My mom's memory was in the will she wrote to make sure I'd be taken care of after she died. The will he refused to file. The inheritance he stole from me. He said I didn't understand. Said the house wasn't just property. Said it was his whole life. Said everything he'd built was there. I told him I understood perfectly. I told him 7 years ago my whole life was in that house too, and he threw it away. I told him I was 16, and he put my entire existence in garbage bags and left it on the lawn. I told him he gave me $30 and said that was my inheritance. I told him now he knew exactly how that felt. He said he'd made a mistake. Said people make mistakes. Said I was being cruel by not giving him another chance. I told him he'd had 7 years of chances. 7 years to call me. 7 years to apologize. 7 years to make it right. He chose not to. Then he said something that made me angrier than anything else in this whole process. He said my mom would be ashamed of me. He said she raised me better than this. He said she'd be disappointed in the person I'd become. I told him my mom made him promise to take care of me when she was dying. My grandmother was there when it happened. My mom made him swear he'd make sure I finished school and had a home. He promised her. Then 2 years later, he broke that promise and threw me out. I told him if my mom could see what he did, she'd be ashamed of him, not me. He hung up after that. Vanessa tried a different approach. She found me on LinkedIn somehow and sent me a message. Said she knew I was angry and I had a right to be. Said she'd made terrible mistakes 7 years ago. Said she'd been in a bad place after her divorce and she'd taken it out on me. Said she'd convinced Gordon that the house needed to be theirs. That bringing her sons into a situation where I had seniority would cause problems. She said she'd been wrong. Said she'd let her own insecurities and need for stability make her cruel. Said she'd treated me like a threat instead of a kid who just lost his mom. Said if she could go back, she'd do everything differently. Then she said that Stuart and Abel didn't deserve to suffer for her mistakes. Said they'd lived in that house for 7 years, and it was the longest they'd lived anywhere. Said forcing them to move would be traumatic. Said she was begging me to reconsider the sale and accept a payment plan. I didn't respond to the LinkedIn message, but I thought about what she said. About Stuart and Abel being traumatized by having to move. About them losing the longest stable home they'd had. Then, I thought about myself at 16. About how I'd lost the only home I'd ever known. About how I'd had to bounce between friends' houses and apartments with strangers. About how I'd worked 40 hours a week while trying to finish high school. About how I'd had to figure out survival when I should have been figuring out what college to apply to. Stuart and Abel weren't 16. They were 19 and 17 now. Old enough to understand. Old enough to work. Old enough to help their mom figure out what came next. They weren't getting thrown out with garbage bags. They were getting 30 days notice and whatever money Gordon got from the sale after the mortgage was paid off. That's more than I got. The closing happened yesterday. I drove back again. My lawyer said I didn't have to be there for the signing, but I wanted to be. I wanted to see it finish. The closing took place at a title company office. Gordon wasn't required to attend, but he showed up anyway. He sat on the opposite side of the room from me, didn't look at me, just stared at the papers in front of him. The buyer's lawyer went through all the documents, the sale price, the distribution of funds. After the mortgage was paid off and the closing costs were handled, there was about $140,000 left. That got split according to the ownership percentages established by the court. I got $90,000. Gordon got $50,000. Gordon had to sign papers acknowledging the sale, had to sign papers acknowledging the distribution of funds, had to sign papers confirming he'd vacate the property within 30 days. His hand shook the whole time. After everything was signed and notarized, I got a check. $90,000. My inheritance. The money my mom wanted me to have 7 years ago. The money Gordon kept from me while I was working minimum wage jobs and eating rice and beans. I looked at Gordon across the room. He was staring at his own check. $50,000. Not enough for a down payment on another house in that area. Not enough to replace what he'd lost. Enough to rent an apartment somewhere and start over. Just like I'd had to do at 16. Except I'd started with $30. I put my check in my jacket pocket. Stood up, started to leave. Gordon called my name. I stopped, turned around. He was standing now. He asked if this was really it. If this was how we were ending things. If I was really going to walk away and never talk to him again. I told him he'd already made that decision 7 years ago. I told him I was just finishing what he started. He said he was sorry. Said he'd made mistakes, but he was still my father. Said we were still family. Said that had to mean something. I told him family doesn't throw each other away. Family doesn't film humiliation for social media. Family doesn't steal inheritances. Family doesn't let 7 years pass without a single phone call. I told him he stopped being my father when he said I wasn't his son. I told him this was just business now. Legal business that was finally concluded. Then I left. I drove back to my apartment yesterday evening. Put the check in my bank account this morning. $90,000. It's not changing my life the way it would have at 16. I have a good job now. I have savings. I have stability. But it was never really about the money. It was about Gordon learning that actions have consequences. It was about him feeling what I felt. It was about him standing in a room, signing papers that ended his life as he knew it. The same way I stood on a lawn at 16 watching my life end. My grandparents called me this morning. My grandmother said she'd heard the sale went through. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. She said she understood why I did it, but she was sad it had come to this. I told her Gordon had 7 years to prevent this, and he chose not to. She said she'd talked to Gordon last night. He'd called her crying. Said he didn't know where he was going to live. Said he'd ruined everything. Said he deserved what happened, but Vanessa and her sons didn't. My grandmother said she told him that 7 years ago, I didn't deserve what happened either. She said she told him he'd made his choice and now he had to live with it. I don't know where Gordon and Vanessa are going to move. I don't know what's going to happen to them after they leave the house. Honestly, I don't care. They have 30 days to figure it out. They have $50,000 to start over with. They have each other. That's more than I had. 7 years ago, Gordon stood in a doorway and told me I was nothing but a burden he was done carrying. He slapped $30 on a garbage bag and said that was my inheritance. Vanessa filmed it all and posted it online. Yesterday, Gordon sat in an office and signed papers giving up the house my mom wanted me to have. He walked away with a check that won't change his life. He's got 30 days to pack up and move out. I've spent 7 years carrying the anger from that October afternoon. Every decision I made, every job I worked, every class I took, it was all leading to this. People told me to let it go, to move on, to forgive. I never did. I stayed focused on the goal, and now it's done. Gordon learned what it feels like to lose everything. Vanessa learned that filming someone's trauma for entertainment has consequences. Stuart and Abel learned that laughing at someone's pain doesn't mean you're safe from your own. I'm not going to pretend this fixed anything inside me. I'm not healed. I'm not at peace. But I'm satisfied. Gordon wanted me to stop being a burden 7 years ago. Now, I'm not a burden anymore. I'm a property owner who enforced his legal rights. I'm someone who couldn't be thrown away and forgotten. I'm done with all of them. Gordon can spend the rest of his life trying to rebuild. Vanessa can figure out how to explain to her sons why they have to move. They can all deal with the consequences of deciding that one teenager wasn't worth basic human decency. I've got $90,000 and a life I built from nothing. They've got 30 days and whatever they can fit in their cars. Seems fair to me.